Now, what I want to talk about is I want to talk about resistance in its different forms. Right? Okay, so let's think. Most of the resistance that we think about is automatically physical resistance, right?
No.
But this author here is talking about different forms of resistance. So see if you can pick up on some of these forms. Okay. Does anybody want to start? Go ahead, Sergio.
There were those who escaped to the forest, who crawled through the sewers, who jumped on back of trains. There were those who smuggled messages, who smuggled dynamite, inside bread loaves, inside matchboxes, inside corpses. There were those who were shoemakers, who put nails into the boots of German soldiers. There were those who wrote poetry, who put on plays, who taught the children. There were those who fed each other.
Okay. So I want you to take 1 minute, and on the sheet of paper that you guys have out, I want you to write 3 ways that people resisted that are not up here. Based on what you read on the poem. So 3 ways that people resisted based on what you read from the poem. You can write it on the bubble chart that you've already started. All right. Who wants to give me one? Raise your hand. Who wants to give me one? Raise your hand. Somebody who hasn't said anything. John.
I put running away or escaping.
Okay, escaping. Good. Chantel, can you give me one?
They would send messages to each other.
Okay, secret messages. Good. Gladys?
They're like, I don't know how to say it, but like they're slaves, like that word for like the German.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Like they're slaves.
Like, where did you get that from the poem?
Yeah.
Where?
For the shoemakers with like nails and boots.
Okay, so what we're asking is how are they going against the Germans?
Oh.
So you're on the right track. How did they go against the Germans in that little area? What did they do?
Like physical fighting though.
Is it like physical fighting?
What?
Well, putting nails into the shoes.
First of all, what are we referring to? Because it might not be clear what we're referring to. What part are you questioning right now? Read that section.
There were those who were shoemakers.
There were those who were shoemakers. Keep going.
Who put nails into the boots of German soldiers.
Who put nails into the boots of German soldiers. Is that a form of resistance?
Yes.
How? Sabotage. Okay. How many of you guys have heard of that word sabotage? What does it mean to sabotage something?
Make things
Justin?
Like, just making sure that it doesn't, like...
It doesn't go as they planned it.
Okay, it doesn't go as they planned. So what was the original plan? For those people to do what?
What they're told and go. Or
We're talking about the shoemakers. What is it? Somebody said it. To make shoes, right? How did they sabotage that though?
Put nails in those.
By putting the nails in them. Does it make sense?
yeah.
So they, through sabotage, they put the nails in the shoes so when the Germans went to put them on, ow, right? It was like a little, What else? There's more.
They
Edgar?
taught the children?
Taught the children, good.
Like
They were actually, Jews were actually forbidden in the ghettos to have schools set up or to teach religion or things like that. But they resisted that and they still taught the children. Nick?
They would write poetry and plays.
Good. So art, write poetry, plays. Justin?
Smuggling?
Smuggling. Okay, so whether they're smuggling notes or supplies, weapons. You can put weapons, supplies, know our tour guide talked about this. There was a huge resistance movement in the Warsaw Ghetto. Okay, you all have heard of the Warsaw Ghetto, right? It was one of the bigger ghettos in Poland. And when the ghetto was finally evacuated, there were a few hundred people left over. Those people who were left, they actually resisted, and they actually were able to put up a fight for a month. So even though these people died, right, they fought. So they died fighting. And a lot of the things that they had that they were able to collect was through smuggling. So they smuggled weapons, supplies, and they were able to accumulate enough to actually defend the ghetto for a month. When you're comparing just a few hundred people to the German military, that's a big deal. That they were able to hold the Germans off for so long. That was quite an accomplishment. Okay. Any others? Based on the poem? Alright. So here's what I want you guys to write on your paper. This is the next question. How did Jacob resist? So write that down. This is question number 2. Right underneath the chart. How did Jacob resist?
Jacob.
Right now.
Oh.
We're not watching Jacob Alive.
Okay. So the first movie you're going to watch is Resistance, but it's not overt. It's not something, you're not going to see them physically fighting the Germans. Okay, that's the second movie. That's Defiance, where they actually physically fight the Germans. Okay? The resistance in this movie is a little bit more hidden. And by the end of the movie, you should be able to tell me what that is. Okay, because it becomes more and more obvious as you're watching the movie. I'm going to stop the movie a few times so that we can go back and talk about it. And make sure you guys are following along. Because there is this myth, this stereotype that's perpetuated, that people think that the Jews just willingly said, oh, my deportation papers are here, I'm going to get on this train, and they were they would be shipped to the gas chambers and they wouldn't say anything, they wouldn't do anything. That's not true. It's not your fault that you believe this myth, because this is what we see in a lot of movies, right? A lot of the movies that talk about World War II, that's what they show. They show all the people being deported. Okay. Now, some of you guys have different perspectives of resistance, which is why I asked you that question. Have you ever resisted authority? And notice that there's a how and there's an explain. So let me get some people to answer that question. How many of you guys have resisted authority? Mayan? Who and how?
From who?
Who was the authority figure?
My dad.
Okay, your dad, and how?
Like, I don't feel like going to work, but like he like go to work and everything. But one day I just didn't go to work and like skipped work.
So what did you do? What's that called? When you don't follow somebody's orders?
Taking a stand.
Rebellion,
Disobedience.
Disobedience?
revolting.
Rebellion.
A stand.
Rebellion is the name of
Okay.
revolting.
What else?
Right back.
Anybody else? Give me an example. Hold on before you start writing it. Actually, yeah, why don't you guys go ahead and do this bubble chart. So forms of resistance. So Nayam was disobedient. Okay, what else?